Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're getting into one of the most enduring mysteries in music history. Just a truly tragic, frustrating case. The 1997 murder of Christopher Wallace, the notorious B.I.G.
Yeah, and this isn't just about finding the shooter. The sources we're looking at suggest the story around the investigation, the alleged failures, might be just as significant.
Absolutely. So our mission today really is to analyze this incredibly complex picture. We've got celebrity, alleged gang ties, and crucially, claims of police corruption all tangled up.
That's right. We need to try and separate, the official findings from the theories that have persisted for decades, because the line between known fact and, frankly, conspiracy is really blurry here.
And that's the core tension, isn't it? You have this narrative of a possible gang hit, but it's immediately clouded by these really serious allegations against the LAPD. The very people supposed to solve it are accused of being involved or at least covering it up.
It's a huge problem. I mean, it creates this fundamental issue for you, the listener. How do you trust an investigation when the investigators themselves are under such suspicion?
Well, that distrust really came to a head with the legal action, didn't it?
It absolutely did. Let's start there. In 2002, the Wallace family filed this massive wrongful death lawsuit against the city of Los Angeles.
And they weren't just suing for negligence. They made this extraordinary claim that corrupt LAPD officers were actually involved in Biggie's murder.
Exactly. I mean, accusing police of assassination, that's a huge step. And they didn't just make vague accusations. They named specific officers. David Mack and Rafael Perez.
Okay, and those names mean something, especially in LA history.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone familiar with LA law enforcement back then knows those names are tied directly to the Rampart scandal, this huge police corruption case. Planting evidence, false testimony, widespread misconduct in the anti-gang units. It was massive.
So the family was basically saying, look, this known corruption wasn't just petty stuff. It went all the way to murder. What happened with that lawsuit? I gather it got pretty messy.
Messy is an understatement. It completely fell apart in court. By 2005, a federal judge had to declare a mistrial.
And why was that? Was it about the murder evidence itself?
No, and this is critical. It wasn't because the family couldn't prove their case about the murder. The mistrial was declared because of misconduct by the LAPD.
They hid evidence, right?
They actively withheld documents. Key information, stuff directly relevant to the family's claims about Mack and Perez, was kept secret. The judge found it was a deliberate effort to obstruct the family's lawsuit.
Wow. So the court basically confirmed the department was stonewalling.
Confirmed it and penalized them for it. The city was ordered to pay the Wallace family $1.1 million.
Which sounds like a settlement, but it wasn't, was it?
No, not at all. That money was purely sanctions. It was the court forcing the city to cover the family's legal fees because the LAPD had lied and obstructed. It was essentially a court-ordered finding that the department had actively blocked the pursuit of justice in this civil case.
So even though the main lawsuit was eventually dismissed in 2010, though, importantly, without prejudice, meaning they could refile it,
Right.
that $1.1 million payment kind of stands as proof of institutional failure, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The LAPD did obstruct things.
It certainly cemented that perception. And if the official channels confirm obstruction, well, that makes the theories coming from within the department even more compelling.
Okay, so let's pivot to those internal theories. There were basically two main narratives that came out of the investigations themselves, right?
Exactly. Two competing ideas from LAPD detectives. We have to start with Russell Poole. He was the original detective on the case, and he essentially became a whistleblower.
Poole represents Theory A, the LAPD cover-up. He wasn't just suggesting bad police work, he was alleging a full-blown conspiracy, wasn't he?
He was. Poole became convinced, based on evidence he said he uncovered, that officers David Mack and Rafael Perez were directly involved in plotting and carrying out Biggie's murder.
And he thought the cover-up went high up.
All the way to the top, according to him. He specifically accused then-Chief Bernard Parks of shutting down his investigation, suppressing evidence, basically protecting dirty cops.
That's a career killer, making accusations like that against the chief.
Oh, yeah. He ended up retiring in protest. He felt the department wasn't just failing to solve the murder, it was actively hiding the truth.
Okay, so that's Poole's explosive theory. Now compare that to Theory B, which came later from Detective Greg Kading.
Right. Kading led a special task force around 2006 looking into both the Biggie and Tupac murders. His team came to a very different conclusion about who pulled the trigger in Biggie's case.
This is Theory B, the industry gang hit. What did Kading find?
Kading's investigation concluded the shooter wasn't LAPD. He identified a mob Piru Bloods gang member named Wardell Faust, known as Poochie, as the triggerman.
And the alleged motive.
Kading claimed Poochie was hired by Mr. Knight, the owner of Death Row Records at the time. The idea was that Knight orchestrated it, possibly through an intermediary, while he himself was in jail. Basically, retaliation in the whole East Coast-West Coast feud.
So a straightforward gang hit, ordered by a rival. But where does the LAPD corruption fit into Kading's theory? Because he didn't completely dismiss it, did he?
No, and this is a really important nuance. Kading didn't find evidence that cops pulled the trigger, but he acknowledged that the known corruption within the LAPD, the whole Rampart situation, likely played a role in obstructing the investigation after the fact. It helped create cover.
So even in the theory without cops as shooters, police corruption is still blamed for why the case remains unsolved.
Precisely. That corruption seems to be the common thread, doesn't it? Whether it's direct involvement or just enabling a cover-up, the LAPD's internal problems are central to why we still don't have definitive answers.
Which is why we need to look closer at those connections. Okay, let's unpack this. How tight were the links between Death Row Records, the gangs, and these corrupt officers?
They were disturbingly close. I mean, it's well documented that Mr. Knight hired off-duty LAPD officers for security, and guess what? Some of those same officers were later implicated in the Rampart scandal.
It suggests a fundamentally compromised relationship from the start.
Absolutely. And when you look at the key figures named, well, it paints a pretty stark picture.
Let's start with David Mack again, the convicted bank robber.
Right. David Mack, officer in the elite CRH anti-gang unit, convicted in '97 for robbing a Bank of America of over $700,000. He had known ties to Mr. Knight and documented connections to the Bloods gang. It's pretty brazen.
A cop, a bank robber, and associated with gangs and death row. Then there's his partner, Rafael Perez.
Perez, also Suresh Ashanit. He was really the central figure who blew the lid off the Rampart scandal when he got caught stealing cocaine from an evidence locker. He admitted to framing people, planting evidence, just widespread corruption. And like Mack, he had ties to the Bloods and links to death row.
So the idea that these specific guys might be involved, either directly or in covering things up, suddenly doesn't seem so far-fetched, given their track records.
It provides a plausible framework, the motive, the means, the connections, it's all there. When you have officers operating that far outside the law, protecting associates or covering up crimes linked to someone like Knight seems, well, disturbingly possible.
And then there's the third officer, Kevin Gaines. His story is almost unbelievable in terms of timing.
Yeah, Kevin Gaines, another CRH officer, also with alleged Bloods ties, the connection here. He was reportedly dating Mr. Knight's ex-wife.
Oh.
But the timing. Gaines was shot and killed in a road rage incident by an undercover officer on March 18th, 1997.
March 8th. Wait, Biggie was killed on March 9th. That's only 9 days later.
Exactly. 9 days. That convergence of violence and corruption involving these interconnected figures, all within that short window, it just fuels the speculation.
So even if you can't prove an officer pulled the trigger, the sheer overlap CRAH unit, Bloods, Mr. Knight's security, creates this environment where complicity seems almost inevitable. They were all swimming in the same murky water.
That's a good way to put it. It creates a scenario where a street-level hit, maybe ordered by Knight, could easily be facilitated or, crucially, covered up by elements within the LAPD who were already compromised.
Okay, so that brings us back to Kading's prime suspect for the actual shooting, Wardell Poochie Faust.
Right, the Mob Tiru Blood member. Kading's theory relies heavily on witness testimony gathered years later.
People like Mob James McDonald. He was close to death row, wasn't he?
Very close. And McDonald has been quite public in his belief that Poochie was the shooter. He ties it directly to the East Coast-West Coast beef, retaliation for Tupac, all orchestrated via death row connections.
And Reggie Wright Jr., who was head of security at death row.
Wright also provided context, confirming Poochie was a known associate of Knight's circle in Compton back then. It adds credibility to the idea that Poochie could have been tapped for something like this.
It connects the gang element directly back to the label hierarchy.
Exactly.
Now, there's a really important piece of context here about why these guys, McDonald and Wright and others, felt safe talking about Poochie years later.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. Poochie Faust is dead. He was killed in 2003. The sources are pretty clear that people only felt comfortable implicating him publicly after he was gone, removing the threat of retaliation.
Which makes sense. Accusing a known gang member associated with death row of murder isn't something you do lightly while he's still around.
Definitely not.
Okay, so let's try and synthesize this. We've got the backdrop of proven LAPD corruption rampart, the obstruction in the civil suit. That's one major force.
Right. Institutional failure.
And then we have the specific theory, mainly from Kading, pointing to Mr. Knight ordering a hit carried out by this gang member, Poochie.
Correct. The gang hit theory.
What's so wild is how these two things intertwine. The sources seem to suggest the gang hit might be the what, but the LAPD corruption is the why it's never been solved, why there's so much distrust.
That's exactly it. The lack of definitive proof, the lack of official accountability, it lets both narratives coexist. Was it cops? Was it gangs? Was it both involved in different ways? The failure to solve it allows all possibilities to just hang there.
The sources kind of land on this idea that Knight, the corrupt officers, and Poochie all had a hand in it, in some combination of planning, executing, and covering up.
Yeah, it points towards a shared responsibility, even if the precise roles are murky.
Which really leaves a huge question for you, the listener. If the very institution meant to solve the crime is also accused of causing it or deliberately covering it up, how can you ever truly establish the truth? How do you get past the conspiracy when the foundation of trust is just gone?
It suggests the cover-up itself becomes this massive obstacle, maybe even a bigger issue than the original crime, because it erodes faith entirely. Think about it. Sarah-ish officers meant to stop gang violence, allegedly involved in corruption and potentially linked to covering up a murder tied to those same gangs. It forces you to confront the fragility of justice. What happens when the enforcers are also the breakers, destroying the path to accountability?
It leaves us, decades later, still asking the same questions, trapped in a loop of speculation and distrust.
A truly frustrating and tragic legacy.